Hey, good morning, good morning, good morning. How are we? Feeling awake? Feeling alive? Slightly? Who got 2 hours of sleep? You got 2 hours of sleep? Proud of you. Who got 8 hours of sleep? The person sitting right next to the person that got 2 hours of sleep. Great. Love it. Hey, I'm so excited to be able to connect and to hang for the next 45 or so minutes with you about a fun word called anxiety. For a show of hands, who wrestles with anxiety? Fantastic. Here's the thing, is that every single one of us in some capacity can wrestle with anxiety. Even there's a very real possibility that you felt anxious about coming to a power track called Anxious Me. And there even is a possibility that you're like, I don't want to go to a power track on anxiousness because I don't want to be perceived as someone who is anxious. Maybe that was even your thought, or maybe that was someone else, a friend's thought. Maybe you're here because you want to learn about anxiety and you don't really have anxiety. Maybe you're here because you want to learn about what clinical anxiety is like, because if you read the blurb in the description, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Maybe you want to know, is my anxiety a sin? We're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to cover a bunch of different things, and to be forthright with you, I might make you more anxious. And I might make you more anxious because we're going to raise a little bit of a tension in this conversation, because we need to be willing to talk well, intentionally, biblically, when it comes to such a real, heavy, and relevant topic. So my hope is I'm not going to make you too anxious, because also, hi, my name is Tony, and I'm an anxious person. So they asked an anxious person to talk to a bunch of other anxious people. So this is going to go really, really well. I promise you. And here we are, that you are, first off, if you deal with anxiety, you're not alone. And we're going to, I really hope that this is going to be something you're going to lean into, glean from, and learn from, etc. Taking a cue from one of our main speakers, Joel, on Monday night. He said if you show a picture of your family, you automatically are going to be a little bit more connected with your audience. So here you go. Here's a picture of my loving family. This is Mary Beth. We've been married for almost 7 years now. This is Corbin, and Corbin is 15 months as of Wednesday, and he is just an absolute delight and joy to our life. And Mary Beth and Corbin could not be here today, this week, but gosh, I love them. And if there's anything in the world that lowers my anxiety, it's them, and the love that I have for them. Hey, I need to pose a question to you as we begin our time. We live in a world that is supercharged with pressure that causes anxiety all over the place. So shout out for me. What are some things that cause pressure, that cause anxiety from pressure? What are some pressurized things in our world that cause anxiety maybe to you or in general? What would you say? Being around a whole bunch of people, absolutely. That's a little tough being in momentum, right? What? Peer pressure, yep. Social media, yep. Your parents, yep, that's real. Public speaking, yeah, that's absolutely true. You said money, yes, that is a pressurized concept. Anyone else? Yeah. You said pain? Yeah, pain, absolutely. How about romantic relationships? That causes some pressure and some anxiety. How someone said parents, family in general. Like, we love our family, but we also can feel really tense by our family as well. It can cause a lot of anxiety. Here's an honest question. Invitation to be honest. Oh, yeah. Teachers, yeah. We'll throw coaches in there as well. Here's a question, and I want you to be honest. By a show of hands, who of you has felt anxiety from the church or church leadership before? Okay, look around. Hold on, keep your hand up. Look around the room. My hand's up, by the way. And I'm in church leadership. In great intention, sometimes the attempted safest place, which should be the church, can sometimes be the most anxious place to be. That's not okay, but it's real and it happens. So I want to validate you that my hope through this time is to affirm, to validate, and to challenge. if there are 3 words I could kind of bring into our time together, that I want to affirm, I want to validate, and I want to challenge. Because anxiety is a tense conversation. And we're going to cover a lot of ground as we go throughout our time. We're actually going to cover 4 different things. We're going to cover stress very briefly. We're going to cover the concept of anxious thoughts. We're going to cover the concept of sin and anxiety. And then we're going to cover the concept of clinical anxiety. We're going to cover all 4 of these things in various formats of our time together. Because we're going to cover clinical anxiety towards the end. And for anyone who takes medication, for anyone who is dealing with this, like, I don't really know what's going on with me, but something doesn't feel right. I want to speak to you for 1 second and to say, if I had like a podium right here, I would say this. Okay, hey, this is my anxiety medication. You're validated if you are taking anxiety meds or if you feel like you need it. And we'll talk more about that later. But just so you know, that visualization right there, as we talk about stress, anxious thoughts, and sinful anxiety, and I start pounding some thoughts, that's going to start making you possibly feel more anxious of like, well, is all my anxiety a sin? And am I doing this right? Am I not following Jesus right? And this tension is going to raise in you. I almost am going to guarantee you it will. I want you to hold out for the fact that we're going to talk about clinical anxiety. That pill bottle is right there to say, hey, we're going to lower the tension a little bit towards the end. So just bear with me as we go through this time together. Stress versus anxiety. What is the difference? Because there is a difference. Now here's the problem, is that the difference between stress and anxiety is it blurs really easily, really quickly. But here's what I would say. Number 1, stress is usually, not always, but stress is usually specific. Meaning, you have an exam tomorrow and you're stressing out over it. Who likes to procrastinate at studying for exams? Show of hands. Great, awesome. You're not alone in that. So you get stressed. And that's probably self-induced stress because you waited till 11:59 to turn in your assignments that's due at midnight, or because your Spanish exam that's the next day. But that's stress. Usually it is specific. It's the championship game that you have tomorrow. It's the debate that you have. It's the performance that you have. It's usually narrowed in on a very specific event, or even a person, for that matter, that could stress you out. By show of hands, who has a person in your life that, if you're just being honest, they just stress the heck out of me? Yep, 2 hands up for me. And we have those people in our life, they just stress us out. They're usually specific. While as anxiety usually is not as specific. It's almost like this ambiguous, I don't really know how to describe it, it's just kind of there. You know what I mean by that? It's just kind of there. You just kind of feel it, this anxious feeling that won't go away. Stress is usually clear cut. Like I said, you're about to go on this trip and you're about to fly on a plane. You've never flown on a plane before, and you're stressed because all the thoughts are going through your head, the intrusive thoughts that go through your head that the plane is going to crash. Like that is stress in that particular moment. It's usually a clear-cut type of thing. Whereas anxiety is a little more elusive. It's this thing that, again, you're trying to describe and you can't really catch it. It's like, have you ever felt crazy trying to describe your anxiety before? Shaking heads, yeah, So you're not crazy. I just want you to know, why? Because it's elusive. It's this thing that's hard to be able to understand and to grasp. But here's the thing. Let me continue on about stress for a second. Is that stress can be a good thing. Not all stress is a bad thing, actually. Oh, by the way, timeout. I forgot to say this at the very beginning. I have a QR code at the very end of this presentation that will have a direct link to all of the slides. Just so you know, I'm PowerPoint heavy, so there's going to be a lot of content. So don't feel the need, the stress, the anxiety to feel like you need to keep up with every single thing that's going to pop up on here, because you're going to have every single slide later on, if that puts an ease to you. Time in. Here we go. Stress can be a very good thing. How so? Stress can be a very good thing in the sense of, okay, you know what? If I have an exam coming up and it's going to cause me to study more intentionally, that's actually good stress. If I have a championship game coming up and I need to work out really well, that's stress that's driving you in forward momentum and projection in a healthy and good way. If you have a conflict conversation that you need to have, and yeah, it's causing you stress, but it's that stress is actually going to cause you to think and pray and ponder, how do I honor the person well in this conflict conversation? That's how stress can be utilized in a healthy way. Stress is good until it consistently sticks around and is no longer productive, where it just continues to harp and stay there and linger, and the conflict is over, the game is over, the moment is past, and the stressfulness is just kind of lingering there. Have you felt that before? And it just won't go away. I felt that before. That was very real for me. My senior year of college, that's where my anxiety started. And an event happened. I was feeling stress leading up to it. And then the event passed, and I'm like, okay, I should feel better now. Then the next night I couldn't sleep at all, and my heart was racing, and my heart was palpitating, and I was feeling these like weird, like my mind was going all over the place. I'm like, what in the world is, why? This is abnormal. And then it happened the next night, and then it happened the next night, and then it happened the next night, and then I started feeling like, what is happening to me? Am I okay? Have you felt that before? Until it sticks around and is no longer productive. So here are some warning signs. Stress moving toward anxiety. Maybe you're constantly on edge. Restless thoughts. Heart palpitations. Trouble sleeping. Knots in your stomach. What's funny is that, like, I literally, again, this is real. This is real for me. My story, this is real for me. I'm literally feeling these things as I'm talking to you right now. Intrusive thoughts. Excessive worrying. Easily irked or angered, panic attacks. Whew. And this list is heavy. And if you have felt any of these things, one, you're not alone. Two, you're not crazy. But these could be warning signs that you're heading towards an anxious spirit, or you already are. What do we do with these things? Anxiety has a stupid way of making you feel like you're alone and you're small. Have you ever felt that before? It does this weird plaguing thing on your mind of like, I'm the only one who's dealing with this situation, and oh, no one's going to understand me, and oh, I don't know if I'm ever going to get out of this, and oh, I just feel small. Have you felt that before? So what do we do with that? And it has a way of making it feel super small and alone. Now here's a question for you. By show of hands, is being stressed a sin? Yes. What would you say? Yes? Raise your hand. No, raise your hand. Okay. How about this one? Is being anxious a sin? Yes? Raise your hand. No, raise your hand. Okay. I'm not actually going to give you the direct answer, because here's the thing. It's such an ambiguous conversation. And yes, we have biblical texts that we would even look at. But let me say this. Stressful thoughts, which I would say are more the temporary things, the events, the specific events that happen, they can lead us to anxious thoughts, which are the longer lasting thoughts, which then can lead us to sin. So are there moments where a stressful thought is a sin? No. Are there moments where an anxious thought is a sin? No. Is there a moment that the stressful thought and the anxious thought that aren't sin lead us to an actual sinful thing? Yes. Is there a moment where a stressful thought is a sin? Yeah, possibly. Is there a moment where an anxious thought is a sin? Yep. And is there a moment where the stressful thought and the anxious thought that are sin lead to an actual holy response that is not sinful? Yes. That's the difficulty behind this conversation, is that it flows and ebbs, and it honestly makes us more anxious. Go figure. But here's what I would say. The tipping point of sin, when it comes to your question of, is my anxiety a sin, is when you choose to think and to live out of anxiety or worry. When you have that anxious thoughts, and when you have that worry in your mind, and you do nothing to combat it, and you just soak in it, and you live in it, and you spiral in it. We spiral pretty easy in our head, right? We spiral pretty easy in our head. We listen to ourselves way too much. And we'll talk about that later even, about what's the antidote to listening to yourself. But we live in this perpetuation of motion towards, I need to be anxious, I need to be anxious, I need to worry, I need to stress, because we're humans and we're fickle, and this is what we tend to do. So let me speak for a moment. Again, we're going to talk about that clinical anxiety piece, but let me speak towards when it actually is a sin, and how do we reconcile this? How do we stop excusing ourselves? Because here's the thing, especially in our day and age, is that it is easy to say, oh, well, no, I just have anxiety. It's just my chemical imbalance, or, oh, it's just the events around me. And we excuse the sin that actually is our anxiety. So we need to be very careful that we don't excuse ourselves when we're actually not living the way God would intend us to be. So let's have a moment around that. Worry, anxiety is the suffocating sin of misplaced trust. When you are living in anxiety, and when I mean living, I mean there's like an active, like, oh, I am dwelling on my thoughts. I'm not trying to get out of the pits. I'm harboring in these emotions and these feelings and these worries, and it is dictating me. It's not informing me. Informing me is different than dictating. I'm being dictated by my emotions. I'm being dictated by my worries. That is a suffocating sin of misplaced trust. And that, my friends, is what we need to be wildly careful of. And you're like, but I trust God. Okay. But how often in your anxious moments, in your mind, in your thoughts, in your words, does it speak otherwise? Matthew chapter 26, verse 27 and 34, it says this: can all of your worries add a single moment to your life? Jesus is asking a question. Can any amount of worry add a single hour, minute to your day? Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself, for each day has enough trouble on its own. I was scrolling on Instagram yesterday, and it said a couple days ago, and a thing popped up on my feed that said a post that said something to the tune of 80% of our anxious thoughts are things that actually don't ever end up happening anyways. I'm like, wow, that's really frustrating. That means I'm spending, if it's true, I'm spending 80% or some number that's probably not too far off from that around items and things and agendas and relationships and situations that won't end up in the anxiety-filling way that my brain is telling me it's probably going to end up. That is frustrating. That is really frustrating. We are massive worrywarts. And we think ourselves into a tizzy, into stress, into anxiety, and maybe even into sin when we are not trusting the God that is before all of us and our situations and our circumstances. And here's what I would ask you is, what does my anxiety tell me about my view of God? What does your anxiety tell you possibly about your view of God? That you feel the need to hold on to your anxious thoughts and not relinquish them to a trusting and good and loving and holy God? What does your anxiety say about how you view God as loving Father, or the giver of every good and perfect gift, or the one who is taking care of your tomorrow so you don't need to worry about your tomorrow? There's another beautiful scripture in 1 Peter that says this: cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. This was described to me at one point, and it really stuck. It really hit for me. Maybe it will for you. But this idea that casting your anxiety on him is like taking something to an altar and you're putting it before God. And you say, God, I trust you with this. I'm putting this before you, and you have the control of it. And you walk away, and then you come back a couple of minutes later, and you're like, you know what, God, actually, I kind of changed my mind. And you take it and you run away. To cast your anxiety is to leave it and to go over here. To cast the anxiety is to not go back and pick it up. How often do we go back to our anxiety and pick it back up? A lot. Again, I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But again, how often within our own control do we go back to our anxiety, our intrusive thoughts, our worries, our doubts, our insecurities, our shames, our fears, and we just let them have a field day over our life? More often than we probably would care to admit. But to take our anxious thoughts and say, God, I am active. Like this even what we did last night of everyone getting on our knees was such a beautiful picture of what it means to surrender at the foot of the cross, to cast my anxieties. And God, I'm actively putting my anxieties before you. What would that look like for you to do stats daily, every single day? And why daily? Because we are so prone to go back and pick it back up. So we need to every single day say, God, like almost literally, like God, I'm casting my anxiety before you. It's real. I'm feeling it, but I'm casting it. Here you go. And I'm going to walk away. And to actively do that every single day. Because when we are taking our anxiety and we're picking it up and we have it in our hand, we are saying, God, I know more than you. And I can handle my anxiety and my stressful thoughts and my anxious thoughts and all these things. I can handle it better than you can. That's what you were saying when you're holding on to it. I don't actually trust you. Worry undermines God's love and his integrity. Living in anxious thoughts undermines God's love and his integrity. So we need to be careful with how we think about our anxiety, and we don't just so quickly go to, oh, well, like, that's just kind of me, or that's just kind of how I'm wired, that's just part of my personality, or so-and-so made me do it. Now, here's the thing, I'm not gonna discredit the things that have happened in your past or your present to give you anxiety. I'm not discrediting it. However, what I'm saying is that we have a choice in our minds and in our hearts of how we deal with our anxious thoughts. We have a choice. So are you undermining the love of God by living in your anxiety and your anxious thoughts and your intrusive thoughts and not letting those be kicked to the curb? With discipline, yes. With great difficulty, absolutely. So here's now the turning point. But Tony, what if I literally can't control it no matter how hard I try? You're like, Tony, I'm trying. Like, I'm literally trying to put all my anxiety over your God. I'm trusting you. I'm praising you. I'm worshiping you. I'm at the foot of your cross, and I cannot shake this anxious feeling. I'm doing all the right things. I'm trying to at least, but I just can't do it. What do I do when the attempts of avoiding, combating, fixing, eliminating anxiety, and trusting God just doesn't seem to be helping? Am I going insane? No, you are not. Because there's a conversation that I want to have to validate you. If that is you, and I know I'm not speaking to everyone in the room, now that I'm in turning this corner, I know I'm not speaking to everyone in the room, because for you, actually, this is a point where maybe you're the person that is dealing with the sinful anxiety, and that's all you really needed to hear and to be challenged by and to sit in that and to ask God to transform your heart, to test me and know my anxious thoughts, as Jeff said last night, see if there's any offensive way. Maybe that's what you got to sit in. But maybe for you, it's like, no, you know what, Tony, there's something deeper going inside my physical body, and I don't really know what's going on. And I need to talk more about that. So I'm talking to you to validate you for a second. That, yeah, your anxiety is strong. And you're trying to do the right thing. And you're trying to live for God. And you're trying to live a relatively healthy life. Your anxiety is maybe strong, but here's what the resounding gong of the gospel is that your God is stronger. Your God is stronger, your God is stronger, your God is stronger, your God is stronger. What does that mean, though, practically, when we talk about clinical anxiety? To validate you, your anxiety is strong, but your God is stronger. So let's have this conversation then. And the gospel framework of what in clinical anxiety is. So here we go. It's a medical disorder, defined by excessive feelings or worry or persistent, even intrusive thoughts about certain fears or constant fear in general. And you're reading that, you're like, yep. Like that is me through and through. Clinical anxiety is a disturbance in one's perception, emotions, behavior that begins to define one's reality. So it's not just a little thing anymore. It's now literally like encapsulating and defining my mind, my reality, my perception. It just is dominating my life. And I don't know if I'm going insane. I don't know if this is like the devil tempting you behind every single corner. I don't know if I just don't know what in the world is happening. Many times, clinical anxiety is a result of a chemical imbalance in the brain. And there's a very real chance, I'm not saying this is you, because everyone's story is different with anxiety. And I'm going to talk about the very end of how to maybe grapple with, okay, what's my story in anxiety? But many times, it can be a chemical imbalance in the brain that you just cannot help. So we need to get a little nerdy for a second. Serotonin and adrenaline. Serotonin is it's almost like the happy chemical in your brain. It is the thing that makes you, it's like the mood drug in your body that just naturally makes you feel the emotions of happy and joy and elation and excitement and anticipation. It's the thing that makes you smile. It makes you giggle. It makes you feel lighthearted. It also is the thing that helps you sleep well. It's also the thing that makes you, it also helps with your digestion tract in general to be able to digest food properly. That's a big part of what serotonin is. And it also, in general, is just the thing that helps regulate healthiness of the mind and the body. And serotonin is a level, if you could almost think like a bottle that has this levels of full to not full. Everyone has a level of serotonin in your body. Almost like if we just needed to smile for a moment, you would look at my 15-month-old Corbin, and you would see how laughter is contagious. And you can see how when you smile, when you laugh, you literally get drips of serotonin dispersed into your body. When you laugh, when you smile, like this is what serotonin does. It's the feel-good chemical of who you are. Okay. Now, adrenaline. Many of you have probably experienced adrenaline before. Adrenaline is when you're in the middle of a soccer game and it's down to the last 2 minutes and you're down by 1 and you're going to give everything you got to win that game. When you're in the middle of tech week as someone who is in drama or musical theater, and the adrenaline is pumping because you're doing your long hours in your musical production, and tech week is long and difficult, and you're just trying to get through it. That's when adrenaline is usually pumping. When you are about to walk into a really tough conversation with someone, adrenaline usually pumps. It's this surge that gets you more alert, gets you more awake, gets you more alive, and it just is coursing through your body. Maybe when you're about to have a conversation with that girl that you really like or that guy that you really like, that adrenaline usually kind of spikes up in us. So here's what happens if you can track with me. These two chemicals in our body are so important to understand how clinical anxiety works. I'm not a medical professional. I am not someone who has the stake of truth on this conversation, but I've done my research and I've done some study and I've lived it as my own experience. So I'm hoping there's a little bit of credential there. However, I still would encourage you to go check it out for your own as you go. But this idea that as you go throughout your life and you're feeling stress, and when stress happens, adrenaline usually picks up. As you are maybe not eating as best as you could, sleeping as best as you could, you're feeling stressful circumstances that are hitting you left and right, serotonin in your body begins to deplete over time. It's slow. It's a very slow progression, but serotonin begins to deplete. And as you are dropping in serotonin, adrenaline starts to increase and take over, because there is a need for your body to produce something, so it's going to produce adrenaline if it's not going to produce serotonin. or there's a deficiency in it. So what happens is in one moment, again, let's just talk. You get into a car accident, or you get into again a stressful conversation. Adrenaline spikes, usually serotonin drops just in that moment. And what happens if your body is healthy and regulated? It goes back to normal. And over time, if you are continuing to have these adrenaline spikes all the time of moments due to circumstances, situations, intrusive thoughts, lack of sleep, lack of eating, sinful lifestyles in your life, it could be a bunch of different things, or other other physical things, like your thyroid is a specific part of your body that if your thyroid is not healthy, that also could be impacting anxiety as well. So that's another sub-conversation. That's why it's all over the place in terms of factors that play into anxiety. But the basic concept of when your serotonin drops, usually your adrenaline increases, and it gets to a point where it just kind of hovers in inconsistency. And that's where clinical anxiety begins. When there's a consistent disparity between your serotonin emotion regulator and your adrenaline that's continually keeping up here. So the moment that passes, that was making you stressed, is you're still feeling the adrenaline rush of it, and it's not wearing off, and your heart is palpitating, and your anxious thoughts are fluttering all over the place, and you can't seem to stop them, or you even get to the point of having a panic attack. And it's usually because the adrenaline is spiking off the chart. Whether it's a one-time thing or whether it's it's just hovering in its imbalance. This is what a chemical imbalance is. And there's a very real possibility that some of you have that. And this is why doctors can prescribe medication to help regulate that chemical imbalance. That is what this is meant to do. It's supposed to give you a hit of serotonin, or to help decrease the adrenaline. There's different types of medications that can do different things, which is why every person's journey with medication can be different as well. Because some people might need a serotonin booster, while others might need an adrenaline decreaser of a type of medication. That's kind of like how you have the anti-anxiety and antidepressant. That's kind of the difference between those two types of medications. So I understand that there's a possibility that I've lost someone in the room in talking about this. However, this is important for the person in the room that says, am I crazy? No, you are not. So let me say this. Having clinical anxiety is not a sin. Now, what got you to having clinical anxiety, excessive worrying without trying to live in discipline before Jesus, could have that gotten you to having clinical anxiety? Yeah. So what maybe got you there, what could have been a sinful concept, but the chemical imbalance is not a sin in itself. We live in a broken world, and therefore our bodies are broken, and they don't function the way that they ought to many of the times. Maybe you have experienced that yourself already this week at Momentum Alone, whether it's through anxiety, the body not functioning the way it ought to. Having clinical anxiety is not a sin. It's not something to be ashamed of. Can I strip away the shame for a moment? It is not a shameful thing to work and wrestle with anxiety. It is not. It is not. It is not. I know that takes a lot of discipline to work out of the brain, I understand, but it's not a shameful thing, and it does not mean that you're weak. It does not mean that you're weak. Actually, even more so, it doesn't define you. It doesn't mean that you're weak. It doesn't mean that it defines you. It doesn't mean any of these things. Here's actually what it does mean. If you are wrestling with clinical anxiety, possibly, it means actually that you're human. So, welcome to the party. And I hope this isn't the first time possibly that someone's telling you you're not crazy. But if it is, you're not crazy. You're human. However, since you're human, that means you're a candidate for God to redeem your anxiety. Again, we're bringing this back to the gospel. Yeah, we can get nerdy about science, and yes, we can talk about pressures of the world and culture, and but we're coming back to the gospel every single time. That if we don't come back to the gospel and anxiety conversation, we're just dealing with man-made medicine, and we're dealing with man-made principles and behavioral therapy that kind of that leaves us short. Like anyone else, if you have anxiety, you are a candidate for God to redeem your anxiety. The sinful anxiety that you're wrestling with, just the stressful thoughts that you're dealing with, or all the way to your chemical imbalance anxiety that is plaguing you. You're a candidate. And that's something to really bask in and to really lean into. So we go back to this verse. Cast your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Friends, what would it look like? Again, take your anxiety, whether it's chemical, whether it's a sinful one, or whether it's just stressful thoughts, any of those three, and you're just saying, God, I lay it before you. It is an active discipline. Trust me, I know, I live it every day. Every day is an active discipline to put your anxious thoughts and your chemical imbalance and your sinful thought, whatever it is, at the foot of the cross. But I promise you this, that if you actively do that, your life will be so much more fulfilling and peaceful than if you're just trying to hold on to it yourself. I'm not saying it's not going to be easy. It's going to be difficult, but it's fulfilling. It's worth it. Psalm 56, 3 and 4. When I'm afraid, I put my trust in you. In God, whose word I praise. In God I trust. I am not afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? I love the psalmist saying just that phrase. What can mere mortals do to me? What can they do? If I'm truly trusting in the powerfulness of God, I'm going to trust that. So that's again why I say to validate, your anxiety is strong. But your God is absolutely stronger. And so in the name of strength, running this word through, I'm going to hit these really quickly. One who trusts God is marked by strength. What does that strength look like? It looks like this. Strength is taking the anxiety, casting it before God, and asking him to use you despite it. Strength is taking the anxiety, casting it before God, and asking him to use your anxiety to point people toward Jesus. Did you know that your anxiety could be a megaphone to speak about the glory of God? That in your weakness, he is strong? And that there maybe is someone that also wrestles with anxiety that you need, that God's put in your life, that you can now relate to them, that you couldn't have related to them otherwise? Point people to Jesus. Strength is saying, yes, I have anxiety, but God. But God. But God is good, but God is holy, but God is for me, but God is just, but God is forgiving, but God is going to renew my strength, but God. Strength is saying that if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, as Jesus said in the Garden of Gethsemane, but not my will, but your will be done. If it's possible, God, praying that I think it's completely okay to pray for healing over your body, for anxiety to go away. I think that's completely okay, praying in faith over that. But if God chooses not to, not my will, but your will be done. Strength is not being defined by your anxiety and refusing to play the victim card. This one's heavy. Because it's really easy to be, you have no idea what it's like to live in my mind. You have no idea what the circumstances I'm dealing with. And honestly, that may be completely true. The circumstances that you've dealt with in your past that have brought you to this point of anxiety. The turmoil that's in your mind. But again, we have a choice, friends, fellow Christians. We have a choice every single day of, are we going to be bitter or are we going to be better? Are we going to be bitter or are we going to be better? Many of us in our anxiety choose this versions of bitterness or this version of insecurity, this version of worry, rather than, no, I'm not going to be defined by this. I'm going to be better by it for the gospel's sake. Strength is shifting your focus and perspective to gratitude and to worship. One of the coolest antidotes to anxiety is gratitude. Just to thank God, thank God, thank God, thank God. Show a posture of gratitude to the people around you. That is a way to counter anxiety. I'm not going to read this, but Psalm 23, just a beautiful passage of scripture that leads us towards understanding God, who guides us in our weaknesses, who guides us in our thoughts, who guides us in our everything. I'm going to bypass it, though, due to time. I'm going to bypass that as well, actually. I'm going to bypass all this because I want to get to this. Here we go. Okay, practical steps, and then we're ending our time. Number one, you need to be willing to name what is going on. If you are in your own mind, no one else knows what's going on. You're not talking to your parents. You're not talking to a youth pastor. You're not talking to a small group leader. You're not talking to a friend. You got to be willing to name it outwardly. That is literally the thing that makes you anxious, I understand. But you have to be willing to name it, because that's the thing that has power over you, is the silence of your brain. Is the thing that's plaguing you, the thing that is grappling you of like, I don't know if I'm going to be accepted. Okay, that's real, but let's get to talking about it and be willing to name it. Secondly, speak truth. What do I mean by this? Earlier I said that too many of us listen to ourselves way too much. A way to counteract listening to yourself is speaking to yourself. Now, I'm not saying in a weird way, go around just always start talking to yourself out loud. That's a little strange. Don't do that. But what I mean by this is we listen to the lies and the doubts and the deceits of our brain all the time, but we should be speaking the truth of God over our life. Speaking the truth of God, speaking the gospel, speaking the words of Jesus, speaking affirmation. I'm not talking about self-help type stuff. I'm just saying you need to be willing to speak the truth, because the stuff in our head gets so much louder than what's going on in our mind. Here's an exercise for you. I need everyone to help me with this. I want you simultaneously, I want you to think the ABCs and count 1 through 10 out loud. So think the ABCs and count 1 through 10 out loud. It's going to be great. It's going to be dysfunctional. 1, 2, 3, go. Wonderful. Love that. Okay. All right. Was, by show of hands, was thinking the ABCs easier between the two? Okay. By show of hands, was speaking 1 through 10 easier? Show of hands. Why? Why? Right. Precisely. Your words are more powerful than your brain. When you speak out loud, literally, I'm not talking about, when you speak out loud, it silences the stuff that's in your brain. So what am I saying? Open up your copy of God's word and just start speaking. It can be Deuteronomy for all I care, but just start reading the word of God, and it's going to start silencing the doubts, the lies, the discouragements, the insecurities that are in your head. Why? Because Satan likes to have a field day in your head, whether it's an anxious sin or whether it's a chemical imbalance. He wants to have a field day in your brain. So shut him up by talking. With someone, to yourself, literally just praying out loud is another way you can do that. By just being willing to talk with a counselor. Oh my goodness, it's so much easier said than done, things I understand. But we need to speak truth over our lives because our brains have a field day. Does this concept make sense? Are we tracking with that? Okay, that's probably one of the most important things I'm going to say that can assist you in what you should do. I'm gonna run through these. Number 3 is vulnerability. Just being willing to share your story. It is difficult. It is not fun. It is not easy. It's usually painfully difficult. But friends, you must be willing to practice vulnerability. Vulnerability is the courage to be seen regardless of how people treat you. The courage to be seen regardless of how people treat you. Are you willing to step into vulnerability? That is a must in this type of conversation and growing through anxiety. Number 4 is the relationships. Are you willing to have relationships that build you up rather than tear you down? Are you willing to have relationships that are going to pour into your life the gospel and pour into your life edification? Or are you having people who have poured into your life gossip? Or you have people that are pouring into your life insecurity? Because that is just going to pour gasoline onto your anxious brain already. So be aware of relationships that you have. Here's a couple of practical ones. Nutrition. How are you eating? I know this is a horrible question to ask during Momentum Week. We're all eating horrible, and I'm aware of that. But in general, how are you eating? If you are constantly stuffing yourself with all this junk food, there's a decent chance that might be part of your anxiety. When your body is not being fed properly, you are going to possibly have anxiety down the road. Same with exercise. I am not one to talk about exercise. As you look at me, I am not someone who is very strong. I am not someone who works out. I really don't like to work out at all, actually. And so that's something that I need to constantly be thinking about. How am I still trying to stay physically active? That's part of the reason why I'm in youth ministry. Hopefully that helps my running around and so on and so forth. But how are you living a life that is filled with some physical activity in some sense to help run off the endorphins that are building up in you, which is your adrenaline. Number 7, sleep. Whew, we love our sleep, don't we? But some of you are really bad at sleep. Fascinating sleep studies have been done. Fascinating sleep studies. Your best sleep that you get is between the hours of 11 and 3. Your best sleep. Meaning, if you're falling asleep at 2 a.m. every night, and you get 8 hours, you're still not getting quality sleep. Your best sleep, your best REM cycles, scientifically proven, is between 10 and 3. Our bodies are wired to sleep on the earlier side of the night. But many of us go to bed at midnight every single night. Or many of us go to bed at 1 a.m. So that's something to think about. You're wondering why you're anxious, maybe because your sleep is not great. Number 8, learning. Are you willing to? You should not receive everything you hear on Google, YouTube, TikTok, etc. However, there is a lot of smart stuff out there. There's a lot of smart stuff. So are you willing to learn about it? Number 9, counseling. This is not usually an easy one, but hi, my name is Tony, and I'm in counseling. Counseling does not mean you're weak. It actually is a sign of strength. Please know that. If you're wrestling with, oh, well, what are my friends going to think about me? Who cares what they think? You are working on you to be a better version of you for the sake of the gospel. Isn't that worth going to counseling? I know it's so much easier said than done. I know that. But are you willing to at least possibly process that, entertain it? And finally, medication. Medication. When I talk to people one-on-one about anxiety, this is my last step. I do not run to this. I do not tell people this is what you should go do. First off, I tell people, hey, how are your relationships in your life? Hey, how is the nutrition? How's the exercise? How's the sleep? How's the learning? How's all those things? I will have a conversation with someone about all those things before I say, okay, if you are doing all these things to the best of your ability, okay, yeah, maybe there is a chemical imbalance in your brain, and maybe we need to have a conversation about this. But it's not the first thing I run to. Don't let this be something that you run to. It can be an aid, and it's meant to be something that helps. So just like when you have a headache, you take ibuprofen. When you have an upset stomach, you take Tums. We have medical advancements to help us with this type of stuff. So praise God for that. However, it's not something to run to immediately. So here's our list. As we end our time, I ran through a ton of stuff. Like I said, there's the QR code. All the slides are on there. I also have discipleship resources. This will go to a link tree that has a bunch of different sites, a bunch of different stuff. And if you're looking for devotionals, if you're looking for some YouTube stuff, some website stuff, some podcasts, there's some stuff on there that could be resources for you, not necessarily around anxiety, but around discipleship. And how do I further my walk with Jesus? If I can connect with you in any way, shape, or form, my goodness, I would love to. Because, again, you are not alone in the conversation of little old anxious me. Thank you for being here today. Hope you have a great rest of your day.